Hello, welcome to the Stellar Woman magazine. My name is Stella Olivia Kikoyo, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Stellar Woman magazine. Stellar Woman magazine is here to bring you thriving women's stories, knowledge, and experiences so that you too can learn one or two things, be inspired, change, and thrive in your life. We're here to bring you light, spread this light so that you can tap into this light and use it into your life. We believe that we are changing one woman's perspective at a time. And as we brighten up one woman's life, we know that the families will be brightened, communities and the world at large. So today we are really privileged, thrilled, and honored to be having Tina Baker. Tina, thank you for joining us here on the Stellar Woman magazine show.
Thank you for having me, Stella.
Yes. So Tina is many things. She is a legal and business consultant. She is a singer and a songwriter. She's due to, I think you've already released your new, one of your new singles, that's Jazzy Sensation.
Yeah,
And Tina has done a lot of things, especially in the legal profession. She has spent 20 years as an advisor on different perspectives, but mainly on global tech companies. And she's a co-founder of the tech law firm, Jagshaw Baker. She co-founded the tech law firm in 2013, and this law firm was acquired by Withers and rebranded as Withers Tech Firm in 2018. So there's a lot that we're going to learn from Tina as a stellar woman, and this particular issue is about decision making. And we can see from all these perspectives, from all her experiences, there's a lot of decisions being made. We all make decisions every single day. We are making decisions, but there are those fundamental decisions that really change the course of your life journey. So we are going to hear from Tina herself. So welcome again, Tina. And we're going to start by you telling us more, apart from what we've just said here, or for you to broaden up what I've just introduced here, is who is Tina Baker?
Oh boy, what a question. Well, I'm a person who is, I'm American. I've lived in the UK for 20 years. I'm back in the US now. I started my life in Brooklyn, New York, and grew up there, which I think is one of the best places in the world to grow up, although I wouldn't want to live there now. But I spent most of my childhood involved in music. It was very, I feel really fortunate to have grown up in the 60s and have been exposed to what was actually a revolution in music. I believe the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, all of the rock and roll, Led Zeppelin, my heroes. And so, and I was always involved in theater and things like that. But I ended up going to college at a place in Massachusetts called Hampshire College, which has some stellar alumni. Lupita Luongo, who is that wonderful actress, is an alumni, and Ken Burns, who was a very good friend of mine, and I'm still in touch with, the amazing documentarian, and Robert Epstein, also an amazing documentarian. But Hampshire was a place where the motto for Hampshire was "To know is not enough, non sata scire," and it's an entrepreneurial type of place. So even though I spent a lot of time at Hampshire working on music, I also got very involved in the politics there, and I ran for and was elected a student trustee, which I served on a 2-year term. And there was a lot of turmoil there. I was a financial aid student, and a lot of my friends were financial aid students. I always laugh. You can always tell the financial aid students, they're very well dressed. And the rest of the students are wearing ripped up clothes because they don't want people to know they're rich, but, or they don't want to advertise it. But so during that whole process, I had a friend who said, you'd make a really good lawyer. You should go to law school. And I ended up marrying that person. And, I think that a lot of times, like, I'd never wanted to be a lawyer. I just always wanted to be a singer and an actress. But I'd had some issues with it. Even though it was always my passion, I felt emotionally held back. I had a very traumatic childhood. There was a lot of abuse, neglect, trauma, and which was very typical of those times when I was growing up. I think one of the things that is really interesting, if you look generationally, my parents did the best they could, but they never would have thought about going into therapy as adults, even though they might have been unhappy. Whereas now it's pretty typical for people to seek ways to make themselves more happy, other than just making money. And because we all know money doesn't lead to happiness at all. So there's a certain threshold. If you're below that threshold, it can make you unhappy, but having loads of money doesn't never make you happy. But also they would not think to have their children engaged in any kind of therapeutic activities, which is now very common. So, I've been struggling with lifelong issues of self-worth, self-esteem. And so it held me back as a performer. And so I was having issues with that in college, especially. I was in a band, they threw me out, it was all just like, partially because I smoked too many cigarettes, which, for a singer is just ridiculous. But I had an addictive behavior problem, which I still do, which is very, something we can talk about as we go on. But I lived in a household with 5 adults, 4 of whom were smoking. So, and my mother was smoking when she was pregnant with me. So I think I was probably born addicted to nicotine. So at any rate, where am I going with all of this? So I said, hey, I'll consider law school. So I went to law school. Before that, I worked in politics in Boston for a year. Absolutely hated it. Somehow got involved with this thing that was run by the Republican Party, and it just was not good. So I went to law school, got married to this person from Hampshire College called Arthur Baker, hence the Baker. And we ended up moving to New York after law school, which is where I'm from, because Arthur wanted to be a record producer. And I told him, you need to be in New York. And he wanted to stay in Boston, which is where he was from. But I said, big fish, small pond, you can't do this. And so we moved to New York and he became incredibly successful. So while that was happening, he had me singing with him because we wrote some songs, we were doing all this stuff. And while I was a lawyer, I recorded a single with Africa Bambaataa called Jazzy Sensation. And it was the first record on Tommy Boy Records. And so that's when I got named Tina B, because I rapped and sang, and I was in the studio. I remember this. It was like 2:00 in the morning, right? And I had to work the next day. And we were just like, okay, my name is Tina B, and I come to say I need my music in a jazzy way. So yeah, and it was fun. So that record was not humongously successful, but it started me on a journey of recording. And then I joined a group called Rockers Revenge that Arthur had put together with these 2 brothers and one of their girlfriends. The 2 brothers worked in a record store in Brooklyn near where we were living at the time. And we did a remake of Eddie Grant's song, Walking on Sunshine, not the one that everyone knows. It's you're mine, you're walking on sunshine. And so that song became a number 4 pop record in England. It was a number 1 dance record in America. And we never made it over to England, which I think was a big reason that our careers as a group didn't go on. But we were gigging all the time, and I was going to work. I mean, it was really I was a young lawyer, you know, and I was working really long hours. So it was really incredible. So, but once Arthur started making a lot of money, I we just looked at each other and I said, "Can I quit my job?" And he said, "Yeah." So, and we opened a recording studio. I put it all together. So I was helping him with businesses. We were doing our stuff, and then he got me signed as a solo artist. So that's how the whole thing started for me. You know, I have him to really thank. I supported him while he was trying to get his career going, and then once he got it going, he supported me as an artist. And even though our marriage didn't last, our friendship did. And I think part of the reason, well, there's two reasons for that. One is we were friends for several years before we started seeing each other romantically. And then also, I think we saw the value. I don't know. It's sort of, we became family. It just didn't make sense to not be friends to me, especially because we didn't leave each other on, you know, sometimes when people get really hurt, they want to hurt the other person, but it was more like, okay, this was time for us to move on. And it was not, it was just time.
Yeah, yeah.
So it worked out. It's worked out kind of okay. I mean, it has its challenges, but anyway, so we still work together and we were doing things, and so I spent most of the 1980s doing music, all of it actually, except for the first couple of years when I was working as a lawyer. And during that time, I was an amazing career in the sense I wasn't making huge amounts of money, but I was singing backup for all sorts of people: Madonna, Bruce Springsteen. I sang with U2. I went on tour with Little Steven, who was in the E Street Band. I wrote songs for people like Jeff Beck. And I had songs in movies, and I was in a movie called Beat Street, which is, it's so funny to me how so many people love that film. I remember when it came out, I thought it was the worst movie I ever saw. But it's a classic. It's a breakdance movie. I mean, and it was produced by Harry Belafonte. I think I'm in the movie as myself singing a song, which a lot of people really still love. I mean, it's crazy for me. Like, I have tons of fans out there now from my hip hop dance music phase.
Yeah.
And then towards the end of the 80s, I got signed by A&M Records, and I did a pop album, which I love. It's on Spotify. I own it now. I got the rights to it back. It never got released. A&M Records was an independent label that was founded by Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss. And it was probably the last big independent label. Sting was on A&M, Janet Jackson. I mean, it was a great, Cat Stevens, really good roster of artists. They sold the label to Polygram. It got folded in to Universal, and then they just closed it. So everyone got dropped. They closed the label. I mean, it still exists, but it's not really what it was. So a lot of things happened to me at that point, and I don't think I want to talk about them here, but I ended up going back to work as a lawyer after that happened, because I wanted to keep going, but I was very much in debt and I was scared, and the music business was very unfriendly to females. I found that when I was married to Arthur, everything was fine. You know, he protected me, he pushed me forward. Once that was gone, it was really horrible. So I had a lot of issues right then and there. So I was sexually assaulted by someone. So it was all just, okay, this is really nasty. And I stopped singing for about a year. And then I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was working at this law firm, and I was doing life science IPOs, which I actually loved. The sciences were great. And I did 4 public offerings for a gene therapy company, which took years. And I mean, now we have gene therapy. Actually, one of the coronavirus vaccines is a gene therapy vaccine. And there is gene therapy in some therapeutics now becoming marketable. These companies were way before their time, but this was pre-internet. So it's what one of our clients said, that investors want the blue sky and the hereafter.
Yes.
And yeah, so they invest in things that look like they're going to be, ooh, and so gene therapy and all sorts of other molecular, biological technology companies. So I was doing that. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I had this opera aria going through my head, because during the 80s, I just immersed myself in everything. I saw every opera. I saw Pavarotti in live like 6 times. Amazing. Like, I loved opera. I love all kinds of music except kind of country, Western. But other than that, I love everything, right? Including heavy metal. I just love, so I decide, I wake up in the middle of the night, I got this opera aria going through my head. I decide I'm going to become an opera singer. So I did. It was just, I know. Now, what was really weird about it, though, is I was already in my 30s. It's very late to start singing opera.
Yes.
And I was thinking about going into some programs, but I was over the age limit. Like, you have to be in your 20s really to start training for this. And so I was I studied at Juilliard on the weekend in the adult education program for opera. And the conductor who ran that also had an opera company. So I joined his opera company and I did workshop performances of La Bohème and La Traviata. And he said to me, if you're going to do any kind of career, you have to come at it a different way. No one's going to hire you to be in any companies. And I was like, okay. So I started recording opera dance music with friends of mine from the dance scene. And as you do, and I eventually partnered up with this guy who's now really successful doing music for video games. Incredible musician, Tom Salta is his name. And we wrote a whole album of stuff based on music from dead people, like Mozart. And it was phenomenal, this record. And some of it was produced by Philippe Sace, who's a Grammy-winning jazz guy. And he's still around, he's still working. He just wrote a song with Nile Rodgers. And so we almost got signed twice. And, it's the age-old story for the music business. And so at this point, I sort of was winding down. As we're in the late 90s. I quit my law job. I was working part-time just as a consultant, just to make some money. And then after the 2 deals with Tom didn't pan out, I had a manager then who was a heavy metal guy. So this is it shows you heavy metal and opera are very connected. My opera teacher in London, he called opera singing sophisticated screaming. very, very cool. And he used to call me Scarici. That was my nickname. I loved that because I loved hitting the high notes. That's all I lived for. So, and now I just started a rock band. So we'll get to that later, but I just started it. We're singing Back in Black by AC/DC, which, you want to talk about screaming, but I love it. It's amazing. So anyway, he introduces me to this producer in London who had just worked with an opera singer and was doing an album with him. So I ended up moving to London, and that's why. It was because of this project I was going to do with this producer in London, which didn't happen. When I moved, it's amazing. I tell people, you always, in most cases in the music industry, if someone says to you, let's do this, it never happened. And it's not that they don't mean it, it's just shit happens, and they mean it at the time, and then whatever happens, and it doesn't happen. So but to tell someone to move continents to work with you, and then when you get there to just sort of say, you know what, I don't got time for this, was pretty incredible. Now at this point, Arthur Baker had moved to London, so he was already there. So he helped me out, find some place to live. And I ended up living near one of the people I'd worked with in the 90s, who was also English. So I kind of had a circle of people, and I started doing some music there with other people. I met this guy. We ended up living together for 6 years. We tried to do some recording, but none of it really clicked. So I was performing as an opera singer twice a month. I had a gig, and I was working at a US law firm in London. And And so we're looking at 2000. So what happens then? They hired me because I had all this IPO experience, and they were working with European tech companies that were IPOing in the US. Well, come 2000, you've got internet crash. You've got Enron, which made listing in the US much more difficult. And then you had 9/11. And so basically nobody wanted to list in the US markets from abroad. It just was too difficult. So that whole work stream dried up. So we started, plus there was nothing else much going on. So we started just going to networking events, holding networking events, and I started to meet everyone who was in venture capital in London and large parts of Europe. And then when stuff started to come back, we had clients. It was amazing how that, I always say this. I mean, I don't know that what's to learn from this really, but timing is everything. And I always felt like I've had really poor timing in my life, except for this. Because we were there at the right moment to become known to all. And there were, at that point in time, there weren't that many lawyers in London who did venture capital. And also I was both US and UK qualified. And I think that the tech companies and the investors appreciated that because everyone had their eye on the US. They all wanted to either IPO or get acquired by some massive US company. And so having lawyers who understood the nuances of both legal systems, which are very similar, by the way, because they're both based on common law, which common law being court precedent. So most of Europe is what's called civil law, which is their laws are codified, they're written into statutes. So you have to follow and know the statutes. And so law changes very slowly in the civil law countries because you have to have a whole legislative, I mean, it's a bit, whereas you can just go to court. I mean, you see what just happened in the US, all of a sudden abortion's not a constitutional right. It happened in 5 minutes, right?
Yes.
You know, and they can't legislate that for years. So obviously having a common law system makes a much more fluid legal system. So being that the US and the UK are both common law, it's easy to know both legal systems pretty quickly. So we became, now doing both things together, that you said about how do you handle both. Unfortunately for me, and fortunately for me, I couldn't not sing. So even if I had, except for that one blip after I'd been sexually assaulted and I just like stopped singing for a short minute, I couldn't not sing. So I found a teacher. I've had singing lessons most of my adult life. I still have a voice coach. I have a lesson almost every week still. I practice almost every day.
Wow.
So when I was when I was working full time and I was very busy, I couldn't necessarily practice every day, but I would have a lesson at least once a week. I would practice at least twice a week. So I would have at least some kind of structure. Okay, let's look at the reality of life here. You know, you as a mother know this, right? You have schedules of where you have to take your kids when, and you fit your exercise, for instance, around that. Yeah. So I did the same thing. It was like, okay, it was also with exercising, because of course, you know, that's something you have to keep doing too, because it's without exercise, you can really let yourself go. So, you know, I would schedule practices, like, okay, put them in the calendar, right? And I would not miss a lesson unless I was deathly ill. Plus I was also performing still. So you know, I think partially having something to motivate you does help.
Yeah.
It is more, so I found those things, but that's what's critical about it, is that through most of my life, I have tried to make something so that I could keep doing it. Right? Like, finding something that was, okay, now I have a reason to keep practicing. I've got new music to learn. Because otherwise, if you're just like, oh, I like singing and I'm not singing anywhere and I have nothing, it's much harder to motivate yourself. So I created the motivation. All right. So during this time, and what's interesting, what I found is, with very few exceptions, most of the clients that I got were so, I don't know what the word is, but they were so impressed that I was also this singer. Occasionally, I would hear people say, really? How do we take you seriously? And I was like, okay, you're not the client for me. And these were always men. These were always men, of course, And unfortunately, in the tech world, it's getting better now. And, we have a lot more female founders and a lot more female VCs. But at the beginning, there was hardly any, I used to go to these things. I'd be the only woman in the room.
Yeah.
There were hardly any women lawyers. It's in the corporate field. You find them in family law, employment law, wills.
That's where they are.
Right.
Yeah.
There were very few women in venture capital and corporate. And also there were very few VCs and very few tech founders that were women. So, but having this passion about singing was seen as a plus by most of the clients that I had. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Many people, many lawyers and many people in business also play music.
Oh, that's good.
It's good for the brain, the practicing, the discipline, and also just music is math. So, it has impact on your neural circuits. So it's a good thing for success. I had several clients, and some of them are still friends, like Per Jorgen Parson, who is one of the North Zone founders who invested in Spotify. He and I were in a band together. So he's a heavy metal guitarist, but he's one of the most successful VCs out there. And what's really interesting, and George Coelho, who is a really good friend, I was in a band with him. There's so many VCs. So I started getting into VC bands. And so I was in 2 different VC bands, and we had gigs. I mean, up until I left London, I was gigging with one of them. So I found things for myself to do to keep the music going. And it also kept me from going crazy, because the demands and pressures from being a lawyer. So do you want to talk about
that was good. That was good, Tina. Thank you so much. You've helped to answer a lot of questions, how you integrate both careers, and how one, because that was a key question, how you moved into law, but you brought it out very well. I wanted to know now is, what key skill have you seen? Oh, you've talked about the fact that actually this discipline in music and all of that, this mathematics and all of those are key skills that you can transfer into law. You need the discipline of practicing as a musician. So yeah, I wanted to see the skill sets that you can see in both careers, as a lawyer and as a musician. Yes.
Okay. Well, what's interesting, so it's so the biggest one is focus. Okay. So because one of the great things about music is it's you very focused when you're practicing and when you're performing. You really focus, right? And so it's a great skill. And I find mostly when I do my legal stuff, I'm incredibly focused. And I spot the stuff immediately. So that's one thing. The other thing, though, is that because you are doing something that's artistic, you've got a bunch of subconscious things happening that you're not necessarily aware of, which this is what I think has an effect on the brain. And it opens things up a little bit. So especially for me, for songwriting, because I don't think that these things are related necessarily, but I'm a really good conceptual thinker. And I'm also a really good conceptual songwriter. Like if you give me an idea, say, okay, well, this is for this, like for instance, the song we wrote for Beat Street, it's going to be in this scene. This is what the scene is about. I was like 5 minutes, I had the lyrics. Because it ended up not being used in that scene, by the way. I ended up performing it myself in an audition, but I have a really good sense of that. And conceptually for legal, it's like I am a good technical lawyer. I'm not saying that I'm not, because I know the laws relating to what I do, but venture capital is not as regulation heavy as some other areas of law, like tax law, for instance. And I wouldn't want to do that because it's too specific. I like being in a situation where it's more conceptual. What are we trying to achieve here? Okay. And what are the tools we have that can make this happen? And so it's more like brush strokes than ding, 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 ding. So, and I think that's my nature. Okay. Which makes me, and I don't know if people believe in this stuff, but I'm a Libra. That's my astrological sign. And there are two, the strongest aspects of Libra are love of art and beauty, which total, and the scales of justice. So, here I ended up being on both sides of the thing. I don't know if that's accidental.
I'm a Libra as well. When's your birthday?
Best astrological sign. Both my parents were Libras too. I know, it's crazy, right? And they were both very artistic. It's so funny. Unfortunately, neither one of them pursued, but September 24th.
Okay.
When's yours?
And 17th of October. Yeah, happy belated birthday.
Same to you.
Yeah, so I love how you brought all of that out in terms of the skill set, and I could see what you mean, why you're not a tax lawyer and why you are in venture capital. I think the creativity aspect, the artist in you comes out more.
Right. Yeah, and it's also more of a people business as opposed to other things. But as well, like so many of my clients I became friendly with, and I'm still close to so many of them. And they call me up and ask me all sorts of questions, just what do you think about this? What do you think about that? It's not necessarily just legal, although I have found it hard to establish any other career advising people like that, because, well, if you want to talk about decisions, we can, I can sort of bring this in, because I know you want to ask me questions and I'm just answering them without you asking them. But generally speaking, I've made decisions based on a feeling. So how did I start Jagshaw Baker? Why did I start Jagshaw Baker? Okay, so I was at a law firm that, and I was miserable there, and they were very nasty to women, and they didn't treat me well. And so with every relationship, once it's over, like something shuts down in you. So that by the time they offered me equity partnership, it was just too late. I couldn't see myself being with that group of people. It just wasn't. So I went out there and I started looking around for other jobs. And I had 2 offers from 2 other law firms to become an equity partner there in London, US firms. And then my former partner, James Shaw, who had been at the old firm I was at, he had started his own firm a few years earlier, and he was doing well. And he kept on calling me, come and join me, come and join me, come and join me. And I was scared. But what hit me was, what's the worst thing that can happen? And now how did I come to that thought? Very interesting, because this is really, it's a very normal thought to have, right? Except it wasn't coming up in my brain. How did it come up in my brain? And this is what I love about sort of the fortuitousness of life, or the randomness of life. I was reading a book by Tim Ferriss called The 4-Hour Work Week,
Yeah, all right.
which is a joke if you're a lawyer. Like, okay, I mean, I don't know why I was reading it. Something drew me to that book, even though I knew there was no way in hell I could ever have a 4-hour work week if I was a lawyer. But I wanted to read this book anyway. Okay.
Yeah.
I liked his approach. I start to read it, and he starts talking about quitting your job and starting something on your own, and what's the worst that can happen. And then as I read that, it was like, bing. And I was in the middle of talking to James and also entertaining these other offers. And so that's why I said, what's the worst that'll happen? I'll get another job. Duh, right? Like, I'm pretty marketable. I've got tons of clients. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
what am I afraid of?
Mhm.
And so we started Jack Shaw Baker, and for a while it was huge amount of fun. But unfortunately, as with all businesses, you reach a critical point in your growth where you have to either continue growing or downsize. And so that's why we did the deal with Withers, but that's a whole other conversation. But most of the decisions I've made in my life have been non-decision. That was a specific decision to start Jack Shaw Baker, and to join with Withers was also a specific decision based on doing a business planning analysis and understand. We hired a consultant who helped us with that. We did our wish list. We did seriously, we did the whole thing as if we were just a regular company.
Wow.
And it became apparent to us we either had to A, downsize, B, grow. How do you grow? You grow either organically, which we had done up to that point, but we realized we had 45 people at that point. We couldn't continue to grow organically. We needed more cash. So how do you get more cash? You either borrow it, take equity, or you get acquired. And while we're having this conversation, Withers calls us. So even though I do believe that we had decided to join Withers, it's really interesting how most of the time, when you sort of, maybe it's because that the universe brought them to us, just like the universe brought the Jack Shaw Baker opportunity to me. The universe brought me this producer who did not come through, but put me in London where X, Y, and Z happened, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
No
So I'm not a huge believer that I have any control over my life. Like,
Yes.
I don't believe I have any control over my life.
That's good. Yeah.
It's even though we all, and I'm still guilty of this, I still try to do all these things to try to take control and make everything safe. And, and I think that comes from my trauma background more than anything. But, on some level, making decisions is not really a conscious process because there's all these other forces going on.
Yeah. As you're thinking about the strategic approach from the law firm, how the offer comes to you, and then
because you could say, okay, we're going to do this, and then you go out and you try to find it and you don't find it.
Yes.
Like, how many times does that happen?
And then it comes to you. So yes, yeah.
I mean, without timing, strategy is not necessarily going to get you very far.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more about making decisions, is about being open to those opportunities to come to you, right?
Exactly. So does that mean that you have both approaches? Because there's a time when you had to do all that analysis and planning, but at the same time, you like the intuition aspect.
Yeah, I love that, which is why, like, I'll never do internet dating. I shouldn't say never, because whenever I say never, I always go and do whatever I said I'd never do. But okay, why I haven't done it? Because I love the magic of just meeting somebody. It to me, it's always been like, oh my God, how did that happen? Right?
Yeah, that's
and,
good.
and,
Yeah.
and it's cool. I don't like the calculated aspect for certain things in your life.
I
But
get
you know that there are, so there are decisions and there are decisions. Like for instance, I had this apartment that I bought in 2018 that had tenants in it. It was in Florida. Why did I buy it? Like, I wasn't, so it's a long story. I won't take time on this interview about why I bought this apartment and where it is and all that, but that decision was a very weird decision, and I wasn't exactly sure why I made it, but then it became clear later. So,
wow.
and then
Wow.
the actual process of doing things here, been making, day-to-day decisions, I find really easy if they're, you know, what do you put in the bathroom? All this like decorating, a lot of planning, strategy, that stuff. I love that stuff and I'm really good at that. I don't necessarily apply that to the big things in life. And I know some people do,
Yes. Some people
but
calculate to a whole
yeah,
analysis of even a partner they are going to marry. It's a whole.
right. Exactly. Exactly. And if that works for them, great. But to me, it takes the magic out of life. And I just,
Magic. You want some magic in your life.
yeah, it's not
Yes.
for
How did
me.
that happen? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not for me.
Yes, I
And the
get
magic of how did I end up here, and how did I end up in London? And then I met that guy, and then all it's like, and then I became like one of the most sought after venture capital lawyers. Like, you couldn't make this shit up. If who would have thought that I would have been that, right?
exactly. Exactly.
So
Mm.
growing up as this fat kid in Brooklyn who belted rock and roll songs.
Exactly. That's amazing. Amazing. So let us take you back as a co-founder and running the law firm. Tell us what that took, because I believe your partners were men. Was there another woman?
Well, there were three of us. So, but it was James and his wife.
Oh,
And
right. Yes.
she was the managing partner and she handled all the admin stuff. Unfortunately, she had some things happen and we only had her for about a year and a half. And then James and I pretty much split up her duties. But we didn't replace her. But she's now an entrepreneur doing very well. So even though it was just James and I, out of the 45 people we had, 30 something of them were women. So we were very heavily weighted towards women in the firm, both lawyers and marketing, all our CFO, woman. We hired the best person for the job. We weren't necessarily out there looking for women. But we had a lot of women. And so that was, just there was no decisions made though we tried to hire more people of color, but that we did try, but there just weren't that many candidates looking for jobs in our type of a firm. We had a few,
Yes.
but not as many as we wanted.
Yeah. Although you had the conscious decision, yes. So what type of leadership styles do you have?
Well, I was always the one that, James was dad and I was mom. And, if James said no, they'd come to me. That happened a lot. No, well, one of the things I did, which is not necessary, I'm not saying this is good or bad. I led by example.
Mhm. You live by
So,
example. That's very good.
yeah, I didn't. So if I was expecting people to work late, I was there. I was in the office with them. I never made people do something I wouldn't do. And I tried really hard to train people in my style or whatever I thought was appropriate for them if I saw that. Because, I had several roles there. I was a lawyer. I was actually doing legal work, but I was also very responsible for the business development. I brought in a lot of the clients and I organized a lot of events with clients and potential clients, industry players. And so I would bring people with me to events so they could observe what I did. And then I would always be available if they needed help or had questions. So that was another thing. So I was leading by example and I was making myself very available because I know that a lot of people voice frustration when they can't get access to their manager or, whoever's they're trying to do the work with, right? It's a horrible feeling. It's very frustrating.
Yeah.
Especially if you can't finish what you're doing because you need feedback or you feel a little out of your depth or whatever it is. So I also was always bringing people around and trying to prop them up, as opposed to this is my show and these are my minions, which a lot of people do that in many fields. You see that a lot in the legal profession too. You see some of these partners and they just, they have these huge egos. Like, come on, you're just a lawyer. Like, I'm sorry. Anyway, yeah.
Tin, can I take you back to something? You mentioned you had fear before co-founding the firm. I wanted to know, after you made that decision, how did that make you feel? And did it change how you approached decisions thereafter?
Okay. Well, when I made the decision, I felt relieved. Okay. And I felt optimistic, but I also was being realistic. I said, okay, so, I mean, fortunately, I didn't have any non-competition clauses from my prior firm. So I had a feeling most of the clients would come with me, but I didn't know that. Right. And so I thought, okay, so I just have to brace myself, maybe cut back on buying stuff, like that kind of thing. But I just took a very measured approach to calling people. And I just went about this is something I'm very good at, is planning and sort of mapping out ways to get to something. Again, is what we were talking about. So, I made lists. I made sure I checked them off, that I called everybody. And then with James, talked about what we needed to have in the firm in order to do the work. I have to tell you, I hit the ground running, as that phrase goes.
Yeah.
I didn't have one day where it was like I had no work to do. And by the end of 6 months, we were up to 10 people.
Wow.
We were up to 10 people.
Wow.
At the end of 6 months. So yeah, it felt good. And it continued from there. I mean, it's fun having your own firm. It really is, but it's also, it then gets difficult when you have, I mean, I don't want to go into the specifics and talk about people because people will know who I'm talking about. So
yeah.
But it became difficult managing the varying personalities and interests we had in the firm. And it became obvious to me that that was not my strength. Okay. I was meant to be a leader of individual people, in terms of I'm a great mentor and I can help people with their lives, but actually running the firm and dealing with I wasn't enjoying that at all.
Things. Yeah.
I mean, of course, if everything went smoothly, I would enjoy it, but that's not life.
No, that's true.
It's
That's
not life. And so, there's always issues, and you look at them and go, okay, what do I do about this? And there were many issues that were coming up where I tried and I didn't know what to do about them, and I couldn't do anything about them. So,
yeah, I think each phase in life brings out something that teaches us something about ourselves. You find out
right.
more about yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, your fears, your capabilities, your strength, something you didn't know you're strong at, then you discover it. Something you're weak at, you discover that. So yeah,
Right.
yeah. So each position or each phase just
Yeah.
puts you in a new
Yeah.
position to discover more about yourself.
Yeah, because I never actually saw myself as running a business. So
Exactly.
and even though I ran small businesses with my ex-husband, Arthur. I mean, it was just the two of us running a recording studio, very different, right?
From running other people's lives and everything.
Yeah, having like, you have to have performance reviews, and then you got
Yeah.
people
Wow.
who are not pulling their weight or calling in sick,
Yeah.
and then
Wow.
you got to call the lawyer all the time, and it just became, anyway. But
Too
yeah, it
much. Yeah. More than you wanted to. Okay. Thank
wasn't fun
you.
for me, and it's not my strong suit, so I was wasting my time in a way, which was why when the Withers thing happened, I was pretty happy. But what happened after that was quite interesting. So um
Yeah.
it didn't last there very long.
No. No. Okay.
No, but when you want to talk about decisions, this was a very interesting one. So I had an opportunity to submit a song for a film while I was still working at Withers. And so I called my old partner who I wrote songs with in the 80s and was my best song collaborator. I love this guy. I'm still friends with him. We're still writing. And we wrote a song and we submitted it to this film. Now, it didn't get accepted, but that's okay. It was just, holy shit, I could still write songs. So I decided 6 months after joining Withers that life was too short. I didn't have a lot of time left on the planet, and I was going to go back to singing and songwriting full time. I had some money saved, not enough to support me for the rest of my life, but enough for a few years to just be able to just do what I wanted. So I quit. They were pissed. They were really not happy with me. And I in a way, I didn't really think it through. It might have been slightly impulsive, but again, it was another book that I read. So have you ever read A Little Life?
No.
It's by this woman called Hanya Kanagahara. It won awards. It's being made into a TV series.
Wow. Yeah.
And
I'll
it's
read
about these four friends who the book is like this big. It's not a little book.
it.
Um, so this guy, it's about four friends who from college and what happens to them in their lives.
Yeah.
And one of them was an orphan who was raised by monks, and he was sexually abused by them and touted out as a prostitute to make money for the monastery.
Oh no.
And he ends up becoming like the managing partner of this really high-powered law firm in New York, right? And he's got all of these physical issues. By this point, he's in a wheelchair. His spine has degenerated, like no shit from a life like that, right? And one of the friends says to him, his name is Jude, like, man, you're so wealthy now. Why don't you just retire? You don't need to work anymore. You're driving yourself into the ground. And Jude says, work is the only place I feel safe. And when I read that, something in me went, oh, and the tears just started rolling down my face. And the next morning, I decided to resign. Now, obviously, my life is not as bad as Jude's.
No, that's it.
But it made me reflect on the fact that, yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm still a lawyer. I'm working right now. I'm back at Withers, so I can get there. And I enjoy practicing law. It's not that it's a bad, and it's a great job. I mean, God, like, what a great job to be able to have in terms of using your mind, people respecting you, making enough money, not being like paid $5 an hour, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of stress involved in being a lawyer, but overall it's anyway, but I realized that I'd been hiding a lot.
Yeah.
And that it was
Okay.
time. I didn't have much time left, and I needed to stop hiding,
Mhm.
which is why I decided to quit. Even though I was saying, okay, I'm going to focus on music and writing full time. It wasn't just that. It was more like I wanted to work on myself full time, not. And of course, that's what ended up happening, because 6 months after I quit, we went into lockdown. So everything I was planning on doing was not happening. Nothing. Right? I had a bunch of things going on. Rockers Revenge had gotten back together. We had all this stuff booked. It all got canceled. I was going to be doing this and that. All got canceled. Everything canceled. Nothing. Right? So what did I do? If you told me that was going to happen, I wouldn't have quit the job, because I could have been sitting in my house making money doing nothing. I was just sitting in my house spending money doing nothing, right? But no, I wasn't doing nothing. So I spent a lot of time working on myself,
Yeah.
doing various, meditation. I do a thing called Feldenkrais, which is awareness through movement. I was doing 1 or 2 lessons every day. I just and I'm still taking singing lessons on Zoom, and I was writing on Zoom. So I kept my hand in it, but by the time we basically, I ended up leaving the UK because I was just so isolated there, and I needed to be near my family. And it just, so first of all, what did the pandemic teach us? We have no control over anything, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And how quickly your life can just be upended. And the people who did the best were the people who were surrounded by a support system, and I had none.
Yes.
And so it made me leave the UK, because even though I have a lot of friends in the UK, I realized no family, I was alone.
Yes. Yes.
And so even though I'm not in love with Florida,
No.
most of my
How
family's here.
come?
Well, it's a very redneck state, and the weather is good 6 months out of the year. So if I was wealthy enough, I would have somewhere else to go for the other 6 months.
Yeah.
Because the last 4 months, I've barely left my house. It's too hot outside.
Ooh,
I don't like the heat. So some people love it. I don't.
you
I don't
don't.
like cold either. So I'm not. But yeah, so moving here was a very emotional. So leaving the UK, leaving the job was incredibly emotional decision. Definitely not made by weighing the pros and cons.
No cons, no. Good enough. I thought it was. So good that you mentioned that. I thought it was.
No, it was another one. What's the worst that'll happen?
Exactly.
Except that what's the worst that'll happen is very different for me now. So I'm a lot older than I was before. Jack Shaw Baker was 10 years ago, and most law firms won't hire someone as old as I am. So, I'll just get another job is not just such an easy thing to say. Yeah, I could get a job working at Target, or yeah. So it's not an easy thing. So yeah. So I basically decided to just do whatever I feel like doing, and it's led me to some interesting places.
Yes. Oh yeah. Very good. So you've been able to show us different examples, situations of decision making, intuition, semi-evaluation, and strategic planning, and some emotional, really emotional decisions where someone might think it was more of a rational decision, but it's actually an emotional influence there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you very much. Now, what is the most difficult corporate decision you've ever made?
The corporate decision?
Yes.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm minded to say merging with Withers because I knew it was going to be very different and it wasn't going to be as much fun, and it wasn't. But even though the people at Withers are great and I admire a lot of them, and it's just very different. But I felt like we didn't have a choice.
Yes.
And I guess that's why it was so difficult, because I would rather not have had to have made that decision. I would
Yes.
rather that we could have just stayed on and I could have continued to just be the professor that ran the firm for the rest of my life, which is how James saw it. I mean, it's unfortunate because the thing about James, and one of the reasons why he is and was such a great partner, is that he's a visionary. He has what I don't have. I'm not a visionary. I'm a people person. He's much more of this big picture thing. And he's always been saying to me, you do this, you're good at that, you go do that, right? And he saw me, earning money every year just running this firm. The problem was he didn't see, how do we keep the firm going? Like the nuts and bolts
Yes.
of how we do that. Right. And so I know he's very upset. He wishes that we hadn't done it. He's still at Withers and he's doing very well there. But would he have rather not have done that? Yeah. I mean, I had basically had to drag him into it because he didn't want to do it.
Oh,
And, and for the right reasons.
yes.
But I felt that that's a difficult decision when you know that there are good reasons not to do it, but if you just, we could have maybe tried to continue without doing it, but my sense was it was just going to topple over at something like that can topple on a dime. So while you're making all of these changes and plans on how to implement something to make it survivable, it could just topple over.
Yeah.
And I felt like we were in that zone.
Amazing.
So it was a terribly hard decision because I didn't want to do it either. But
it had to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And had a definitely big impact on both of you and all the other employees.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much the whole team went with us, but half of them are gone now.
They're gone. Yeah.
It's 3 years later, right? So 3 years later, half the team has dispersed to various places. A lot of them have gone in-house to work at clients, which might have happened anyway, even if they had stayed with us.
Yes.
Because private practice is difficult. It's not for every lawyer. And a lot of lawyers enjoy the reduced stress of having one client. Basically, when you're in-house, you only have one person to worry about, one thing to deal with, and your hours are generally less. You don't work
as hard. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, I'd say 5 or 6 of the people all went in-house. So it's not, we would have lost them anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. Now, is that a decision I would take that you regret?
No.
No, you don't.
No, I don't regret it. I don't know how. I mean, I still, if I put myself back there, I don't see what would have changed.
Okay. Yeah. And do you have any decision you regret?
I'm sure I do. Well, I regret certain patterns of behavior, but that's not a decision. Okay, so that's not, deciding to buy something that I shouldn't have bought. No, that's not really. Okay, that's more of a behavior pattern, because I've got a lot of those kind of things. Let me think here. What a decision I regret.
Is there any fundamental one that you regret at all?
I'm trying to think, because most of the things that I regret, I don't believe were really decisions. I feel like I'm trying to have compassion for myself, because there were situations I put myself in because I didn't know any better way. No, I don't really.
That's good. Okay, that's okay.
I can't think of anything.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. I wanted to see if we could tap into your knowledge of helping with startups, whether there is any kind of lesson you have picked up in terms of women running startups, whether there's any lesson, because we don't have a full picture, but you have a spectrum of several advising in several startups. Is there any lesson you think this is what any woman who's venturing into anything, this is what I would like you to think about?
Well, yeah, it's something very simple, which they probably all know, but you have to know more than everybody. So basically, whatever the industry is you're going into, and whatever the product is you're going to develop, you have to know the ins and outs and all the pitfalls and all you have to know everything. If you're really forceful and strong in your knowledge, you'll get respect from. It's harder to get respect from these male investors if you're a woman. Some of them maybe not, but they tend to be drawn, and what I've seen, they tend to be drawn to strong women who are very articulate, who know their shit. And that's not, I don't know how that's not something you can just go learn and do. Like, I think almost it's a personality trait in a way, like, but that's the way with all entrepreneurs. Honestly, not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur.
No, that's true.
And so it's doubly hard, maybe not doubly hard, but it's more important for women to be that much more on the ball.
That's important. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I wouldn't venture lightly into something.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, this isn't probably a great example, but after I left Withers in 2019, I signed on as an advisor to a startup that was founded by a man and a woman. And I don't think they really, I don't know. You know what? Let's not talk about this.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
I spent 2 years advising them and then they folded. So maybe that was a decision I regretted. Not really, though. You never know. It might have happened. It was a good idea. I don't know. I think, the pandemic threw that one out, and pandemic threw a lot of things out. So I'm not sure. I just felt there wasn't, never mind.
Never mind. Okay, we'll continue with that. So have you failed at anything before?
Have I failed?
Yes.
Tons of times.
Yeah. Are you able to how are you able to pick yourself up? How are you able to pick yourself up? Because some people, once they fail at something, they feel like the world has crashed and that's it. How do you pick yourself up to move on?
Wow. I cry a lot. How do I pick myself? I don't know. I don't have a choice. You don't have a choice, really. I don't see, when you ask me if I failed at something, it's not like I failed at, like, well, I failed at learning French, but I don't see that. So okay, so I didn't learn French.
You want to fully invested into it. I mean, it's something
Yeah.
where you are really invested into it, and
So
then it
this
does
is the
what?
here's a perfect example is my music career. Okay. So there are people that think I was a success. And I guess on the level of, if you look at the music business, getting a record deal is very difficult. So some people consider that success. Well, I didn't feel that way because I got signed because I had this husband, right? So I didn't feel like I did anything. Now, obviously, if I couldn't sing or if he didn't feel like I could do it, he wouldn't assign me because he didn't want to put himself in jeopardy. He didn't have to do that. But I never felt like I deserved it. So even though I sang with all these people and I'm a good singer, I'm not like, I never quite felt like I was a success. And so even with everything I've done in the music business, I've never felt like I was a success. Do I feel like I was a failure? Yeah. I mean, because in a weird way, so I started out with Madonna. She and I were friends. We were doing the same thing at the same time.
Is
I had
it?
I had two dancers. She had two dancers. She actually tried to get me to record some songs she wrote that she didn't want to sing. I sang backup on her first record. And so that's where I started. So I look at her and I look at me. So do you think I think I'm a failure? Yes, I do. Do I care? Yes, I do. Have I stopped singing? No. Never. Did I stop writing songs? No, never. And I've always said this about her, like, I have a lot of respect for her, but she wasn't really a singer. She's a performer. She's an amazing performer, much better dancer than singer. Can't really act, so forget about that. But she created a lot of beautiful art with those videos she did were amazing. So she very talented woman, and I had a lot of respect for her, but I always thought if she couldn't sing, she wouldn't give a fuck. She'd find something, you know what I mean? She'd find whatever. For me, no.
No.
Like totally different. So I was driven by something totally, I wasn't driven by success. I mean, I guess that's where I have problems with trying to see where I was a failure, because yeah, I was a failure at having a successful music career that sustained me financially.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have been a failure at that. Do I consider myself a failure? No, like, these guys want me to front their band. I'm like a rock and roll singer now. Do I still have a voice. I can still sing. Like I don't know. I find it hard because yeah. And as a lawyer, in a way, do I feel like I failed at the law? Not. If you look at it, like my contemporaries are like making millions of dollars a year working on these huge M&A deals. Did I want to do that? No.
That's very good, because that's going to lead to a good question, how you define success.
Yeah. So yeah, so for me, success is being happy. That's really what it is. And that's what I've been devoting my life to, which is that's a tall order, I have to say, especially if you've come from trauma.
Yes.
And I would have hoped by now that I would have gotten out of these loops that I've been in for most of my life. But I'm very aware of them. And I'm doing much better at not trying to drown it out, because that's where you make no progress. That's called addiction. And you just go into some other kind of numbing behavior so you don't feel the pain of the past or your inability to cope with what's happening right now, which is actually, I think the entire planet, both humans and others and trees are in a state of pain right now. So, and I read something yesterday that was really interesting, is to stop thinking about healing yourself and start thinking about healing the whole.
Okay.
So
The totality rather than
yeah, because you can't divorce yourself from the rest of it. And so because there's been this thinking along the way that, and Deepak Chopra, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's like has been saying this all along, you work on healing yourself, because one soul by one soul we uplift the planet. And yeah, I've been a buyer into that big time, and have spent a lot of time working on myself and doing a lot of the things that people like him, I met him, I've gone to his workshops, doing stuff with those types of people who lift you up spiritually and teach you how to get to know yourself better, and have more compassion for yourself and others, and all this stuff, which is so important. And I'm not saying it's not. But now I think we're on the verge of a shift. So I don't know if I'm up for that, but I don't know, it may be a way to help one achieve a better state of happiness. It's also that feeling of, and because some people think in order to be successful, someone else has to fail.
Yeah.
Like, and if you think about, don't think about just healing yourself, think about healing the whole. It's also that phrase which has been going around a lot lately. We all succeed. If we all succeed, then you succeed. We need, it's more about making things right for everyone as opposed to just a few. Yeah. And I think with the way social media is now and the prevalence of celebrity just makes it that much more clear how skewed it is and how it actually doesn't work.
Yes.
But now you've got people like Kanye West who are actually melting down on screen, right? Like, it's so interesting what's happening with him right now.
Yes.
Actually publicly losing it. And yeah. Well, anyway.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I think it brings us into a good perspective of life. Do you think about the self? Do you think about totality? Where does the healing start? Where does the whole thing get in? I don't know. We are all on the quest for this, but I think it all depends. I think if it's still love, whether it's for the self and it's really love, it will come and manifest itself to the outer world. And if it starts from the outer world, maybe if it's still love, maybe it will come back, it will go in the second, the whole will still benefit, whichever way that actual concept of love actually starts from. Wherever it starts from, it will find itself in a total loop. But I think we are missing it. We have a lot that we are looking for that is separating us from it. And in the end, we still create more separation and more loss for everyone. Yeah. Even for ourselves, because like you said, the more you think someone else has to lose for me to win. And in the end, that person losing is going to actually come back to you, but you just don't know how. But it will come back to you. Yes.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So let's ask again. There's a question I wanted to ask you about decision making. So how it is important to deal with conflict. That is when you're in a position of deadlock in decision making. So which ways do you actually use? Because some of us, when we're in a conflict position, we are either in a fighting mood, sometimes you give up, sometimes you want someone else to take care of it and cover up your head. Sometimes it's compromise. Some people just go in for compromise. They don't avoid, they compromise and come to decision making that way. So which approach do you find yourself doing more of?
Well, I mean, I think for me, like basically what I try to do is both for myself and the other person is talk about what do we really want and what are we afraid of? So, because if someone thinks that you're just trying to get a better deal because you're just trying to get a better deal, forget it. Or you're just saying no because you can.
Oh yeah, you're more powerful.
Yeah. Or if you feel that they're saying it. And that, but then you just sit down with them and you say, listen, this is why I want this. These are the reasons. It's not some power struggle here. And it's interesting because I've seen this a lot also in legal negotiations. A lot of times people just, especially lawyers, that they're so bad at this sometimes. They'll just like go back and forth, push back, but they haven't really reasoned out why. Why do I want this? Why do I not want that? And once you actually have a cogent argument, like, well, but don't you see that if we do that, it puts me in this position and that's really not tenable for me going forward? And then they're like, oh, okay. I don't know, it doesn't always work, but for me, it's more about really getting to the heart of what's causing the conflict and having both parties or all the parties discussing what their fears and expectations are to try to come to a better understanding of something that will make everyone feel better. As I said, it doesn't always work.
Yeah.
Especially in small groups, obviously, but like if you see what's going on in the world right now, there's so much misinformation and people believe stuff that's not true, that their fears are unfounded. But how do you tell them that?
Exactly.
Right. So that kind of conflict now, I don't know how we resolve that one. I know there are people who are smarter than me that I'm hoping can figure it out, because if they can't, I think we're doomed. Because the information machine is just getting worse and worse and worse. I mean, you have people who are actually citing devil worship and, the devil's going to come and kill Democrats now. Like, it's gotten to like levels of biblical, like, I mean, seriously, I mean, it's a fucking sci-fi movie. Anyway. But I couldn't tell you how we solve that conflict. I know, I wish I knew. Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay, tell us more. What inspires you? Who has been the inspiration throughout your music career?
There hasn't been just one person. There really hasn't. I mean, I've been inspired by different people at different points. So, when I was a kid, it was totally the Beatles. I was just so in love with them. And then when Led Zeppelin came out, that Robert Plant and the way he sang, that really changed my life. And then, but in opera, Pavarotti, just loved him. Such an inspiration. And there were a couple of singers, female singers you would never have heard of, but Renata Tebaldi and Montserrat Caballé. I just listening to them and the soul that they brought, very inspirational. And songwriting wise, oh my God, who inspired me? I just love a good pop song. I can't get that. I even feel inspired by Taylor Swift, although I don't like her new record. But I think she's done an amazing job. Anyway, there hasn't been one person. It's really
several people, different encounters. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's many more that I could think of along the way, but
that's okay. Okay, so which one of your songs would you send to the stellar women in the world? And why?
Hmm. Well, it's not anything that's already out there. That's the problem. I've got like, so it's so funny because the song I wrote for Beach Street was called Nothing's Gonna Come Easy. And there is a message in there. It sounds negative, but it's actually positive. It's basically like you just have to get up off your ass and do something, right?
Okay. That's a good one.
Yeah. So of all the songs I have that are out there now, I would say that one, and that's actually my most Shazam song, I think. And it's in the Beat Street film. It's on the Beat Street soundtrack.
Okay.
And Harry Belafonte said to me, "That's a really great song, Tina. You know, if Donna Summer was singing it, it would win a Grammy." Now, I don't know how, there's two ways to take that comment. One, you can't really sing, or she's famous. So, if she was singing that song, it would definitely get nominated for a Grammy. So he might not have been denigrating my performance, although I'm not, I can sing it better now, but
yeah,
I think it's a really good song, and it's got a good message. It's just basically don't sit around, get up off your ass and just do it.
That's amazing. That's one good one for the Stellar Women subscribers.
Yeah.
So go ahead and listen to that. So what future do you envision for women?
Well, we need to take over the world. I mean, I don't know how we're going to do that, but who was it that said it? Somebody said it recently. Women haven't been, men haven't been doing such a good job. I think it was even Liz Cheney. I mean, there was somebody like that. You wouldn't. Excuse me 1 second.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes.
Somebody who you wouldn't have thought it recently said, women need to be running this world because the men have been doing a pretty shit job. And I think it might have been Liz Cheney, but this is not a new thought, obviously.
No,
it's been going around.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to lead this. So I'm going to ask you the question you were going to ask me about my stellar woman.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, so I thought about it this morning, and two came to mind, but I'm just going to pick one because her name is Carolyn Myss. She's a medical intuitive. And although she does not focus on women, like someone like Gloria Steinem, let's say, was all about women's rights, she focuses on the culture, the cultural shift and the shift of consciousness that needs to be more feminine. But she's amazing. She has dedicated her life to uplifting people. That's what she does, helping people and uplifting people by reading. She talks about how life is like an elevator, and we all live on the first. Life is like a penthouse, and we all a penthouse building, and we live on the first floor. Generally, we don't see the view from the top unless we become more spiritual, more conscious, and then we work our way up to the penthouse where we can all of a sudden look out and see the whole picture. And so she's dedicated her life to helping people see the whole picture. And I mean, she's an amazing woman. There are a couple of people who I felt kept me alive during the pandemic, and she was one of them.
Oh, amazing.
She did almost daily free videos from her house in Chicago to her tribe, talking about stuff, trying to just keep people going. And she does a lot of free stuff online. She just also charges for stuff, but I've been to a workshop of hers. It was a great experience, in England, actually. it's inspirational. She's just, and she didn't give a fuck about like success. I'm sure she's not rich. Well, even though, well, she might be. She's a best-selling author, but you can see that. And when she talks about her life, how the decisions have been made in her life have all been similar to mine. Like she just was like, okay, I got to get out of here now. She just knew, like when she was in one place, she had to leave, she had to do this. And then that led her to that. And she talks about these things, about living life from intuition and figuring out how to lift off the layers that are dumbing down our intuition.
Exactly. Wow, that's good. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So I would say I would recommend, anyone who doesn't know her to pick up some of her books or watch a video of her online. She's all over the internet. And her name is spelled differently than it's pronounced.
Her name is, can you spell that?
Yeah, it's her name is Carolyn, but it's spelled Caroline. So it's Carolin as in Nancy E.
Yes.
And her last name is Mace, and it's spelled Myss.
Okay, Carolyn Mace. Okay.
Mace. It's Mace. This is the thing. I've been through years of mispronouncing her name. It's Carolyn Mace.
Okay, amazing. Thank you for that. Now, if you had to go back in time and meet your 15-year-old self, what key message would you like to give her?
It's not your fault. That's really it.
That's all she would need. Definitely.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. That's really deep. It's deep. It's deep. I think it would heal her. Just relieve her. Yeah.
I'm just coming to realize that now.
It will give her the freedom she needs.
However many years later, that everything was not my fault. So many of us grow up feeling like that.
I know. That's true. That's true. That would release her. It would give her the freedom and the happiness to just be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you for that. Now, where do we see Tina in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh God, I have no idea. Well, as I said, I've been working on putting together this rock and roll band, so who knows?
Yeah.
Rockers Revenge might get back out on the road. Who knows?
And there's always space for the magic.
Always. And I'm writing music with some other people. Who knows? One song allegedly has been accepted into a film.
Oh, wow.
They've submitted. I'm singing it and I wrote it, and it's the film's been submitted to Sundance. I don't know if it's going to get accepted. Wow. I'll find out more about that. So, I may have some more opportunities for film music. Don't know. I'm working with a couple of different companies trying to help them get off the ground. Don't know. I've already tried to help 2 companies get off the ground, failed with both of those. But so those aren't my failures. That's why I didn't mention them. Yeah. Those are companies that didn't make it that asked me to help. Yeah. But it wasn't because of me that they failed. Yeah. So I'm working with some other people on some other things. Who knows? I don't know.
We give it to the universe out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there are intentions, but yeah, a lot out of control. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have a life mantra?
Well, yes. It's from Socrates.
Right.
An unexamined life is not worth living.
That's a nice one.
I mean, I've been living with that since I was really young, because I've always been inquisitive about what's happening. Why is that happening? Why am I doing this? What's going on? Not that I've been able to actually change a lot, or I don't know, but the quest for self-knowledge and for looking at things around me and what's motivating people and things. I could never stop doing that. Like it's funny because I think of myself as a lifelong student, but it's not like, I'm not like some people who like, oh, I'm learning a language and I'm reading about, like, yeah, I mean, I do, I read a lot, I read tons, and I'm semi-obsessed with the Holocaust. I'm Jewish, and I feel a lot of that trauma right now, because I think, what's going on in the world is bordering on, pre-World War II bullshit. So it's bringing up some things for me, but in terms of actually like learning stuff, I'm not learning coding, I'm not learning languages, but I'm continually on a quest to understand whatever that means. So I think that quote always pops up into my mind, that Socrates quote.
That's good. Beautiful. An examined life is not worth living.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. So are you able to leave a challenge for our subscribers, listeners, viewers, to help them to become courageous in their decision-making process?
A challenge?
A challenge to help them become maybe better decision makers. What is that they need to do or they can do?
I mean, honestly, like, I don't believe that I'm a role model for that. So I think all I can say is that I do believe that, and I've come to believe that intuition is probably the most important thing. So whatever you can do to bring your intuition up, because it's dormant in a lot of people, or you don't hear it.
Yes.
Whatever you can do to spark the intuition is what I would.
Yeah, to bring it back, to activate it. Yeah, most of us have silenced it, and activated. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Now, where can our subscribers and viewers find Tina Becker?
You mean music-wise?
Yeah, if anywhere.
Or physically. I'm in Florida.
Very virtually, yes. So if they want to know more about your music, your career.
My music's on the usual streaming services. I've got an artist page, Tina B, on Spotify and on Apple Music and on Pandora. But that's not all my music. That's a bunch of stuff. I have a website.
Yeah.
TinaBmusic.com, and which has my history and a photo gallery and news. And it also has links to everything. So that's probably the best place to go. It's just www.tinabmusic.com.
Yeah.
And who knows where you'll see me afterwards. I don't know.
Yeah, it has been amazing. Thank you so much. So you know where to find Tina. Yes. It's been really amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your journey, your experiences, your knowledge with the rest of our subscribers. And I'm sure you are going to learn one or two things, and most likely you're going to be inspired, you're going to change. We want you to definitely change something based on what Tina has shared. Thank you so much for your time, Tina. Thank you so much for being generous with your knowledge as well.
Okay. Yeah. I'll see you soon.
Next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye.